and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. So let's jump in. Our guest today is Nic Cox, former executive producer and co-founder at Sunday Gravy, and now the driving force behind the creative recruitment agency, The People Place. Nic's career is a beacon of persistence, attention to detail, and pragmatic leadership. He unpacks his insights on aligning with client goals, the art of budget management, and the indispensable value of effective communication. Join us as we explore Nic's advocacy for mentorship, networking, and continuous learning, offering a roadmap for those aspiring to make their mark in production. Nic Cox. All right, my friend Nic, thanks for joining us, buddy. Straight off the bat, mate, you tell me, what makes a good producer?
What makes a good producer? Look, I think there's definitely a combination of skills that help massively. A few being probably personality traits, and others being, I suppose, like learned skills, whether that's in university or out on the set as a runner or a production assistant. But kind of the points I've jotted down here: vision and creativity. So having a clear vision for the project is certainly a big thing. But also having a really clear idea what the client needs to achieve and why they need to achieve it. So whether it's a TV-led campaign, whether it's a little piece of branded content that's going to live across social, why are they making it and what are they hoping to achieve? Which, look, it's a fairly obvious thing, but I think it's often missed a lot in branded content when people are very much just pushing for the creative, and I guess the business goals are sometimes lost. So being very much aligned with the client, say it's the marketing team, on exactly what needs to be achieved and why. I think then also in terms of the creative expectation around the look and feel, I think where the industry's at this day and age, there are obviously tighter and tighter budgets. So just being realistic in terms of what you have access to, the creative that's going to run alongside that budget, and obviously then what's going to be kind of achievable in terms of the overall creative, but then also how it's actually executed, how it's produced. The other one I had here was, which are definitely huge ones, leadership and communication. I think these two are probably the most important, to be honest. So being able to kind of mitigate situations with people is extremely important. It can be tough at times. If you're shooting really early in the morning or late at night, or you're away for a week at a time, you've got talent, crew, location scouts, whatever it be. Keeping people motivated and on the right path is massive. And I think if you're a good producer, that should definitely be your job and only your job, and not fall into other people's hands, which I think sometimes it does. Particularly a great first AD. I feel like if a producer isn't being super proactive, a first AD will often jump in and keep the morale up. Clear communication across the board as well. And that's from, the early stages of pre-production with the client, right through to kind of booking in crew during pre and leading up to production. And just making sure that with all crew, and particularly, key roles, the DP and the director, for example, you're articulating the vision, and you're also, I suppose, managing the expectations kind of across the board. The other one I've got here is organizational skills. This is a huge one, and probably, I guess, as a man with clinical OCD, this is probably how I faked myself as a producer, and I should rather reword that and say, this is how I faked it into the industry rather than faked myself.
Do you know how many times it comes up, people say they faked it in what we're doing?
I think everyone to an extent does in this industry, don't they? I mean, there's only so much you can learn in university. When you're out on the set, I feel like for the first even couple of years, most people are thinking, what the hell am I doing here? But, you're balancing so many different aspects within one job. And then on top of that, you're often balancing multiple jobs. And I guess particularly in the world of content, when you're often playing the role of both the production and agency producer, there are millions of things flying around each and every day. So if you drop the ball on any element, and particularly, I guess, a key area of the job, whether it's the budget, scheduling, talent contracts, location permits, whatever it is, if you're not on top of one thing and then it kind of falls over, you can often find yourself in a situation where there's like that domino effect. one after the other if you're not on top of it. So I would say organizational skills is a massive one. And for people that aren't, I guess, naturally organized, because look, when I was starting out, there were other producers out there that were far, far more talented than I was, particularly in terms of like being, really creatively minded, but all over the shop when it came to organizational skills. And I think that really shows. It becomes very obvious particularly when you're out on set.
Do you think you can be a good producer and have no concept of how creative comes together, or even have the vision in your mind of how something will look?
Look, I want to say no, but yes, not so much on, say, larger TV campaigns, but in terms of branded content, you can kind of approach it. If you've got a good creative who's put everything together, you can be very executional with it. I guess if you don't have a good steer on that side of things, and that goes back to, the director you're tapping in or the talent or the locations, it's just having the right creative to be able to bounce off to make sure that you're heading in the right direction. Because a good creative producer, I feel, and not saying I'm a really strong creative, but really, really great creative producers will go away with a brief from the director and be able to come back and just hit every kind of box in terms of talent, location, crew, everything's kind of spot on and ready to go. The financial side of things is massive, obviously. And again, whether it's a little piece of branded content for social or a huge campaign, managing the budget and being across every aspect of the process. So that goes from, creating the budget in the right manner, I suppose, to keeping it updated. And even if it's sitting in a spreadsheet, just having the correct formatting and going back into that kind of daily or even hourly to make sure that everything is updated, to the dollar, ideally. And then understanding how to allocate resources effectively as well without compromising, I suppose, that the quality of the piece is also a big skill. And again, when you often have a small budget and huge expectations, that one can be a little bit tricky to balance in terms of where best to utilize the dollars to be able to hit the mark. The last one here I've got is networking and relationship building. So building and maintaining relationships with the right people is key. I mean, it's obviously a very small industry. So again, whether it's crew, talent, any other kind of stakeholders, your network and reputation is really everything. And it's probably more so in like the content space as well, when you're working directly with so many individuals and you're booking individuals in yourself. I think if people like you and they want to work with you, that's a gold mine. It just makes life so much easier.
How did you get your training and experience as a producer? Where'd you learn?
I can probably be very honest regarding this question, as I'm not kind of actively producing in advertising at the moment. I had little to no training or experience as a producer, or at least prior to starting my first kind of content agency back in 2015. I studied media and communications, and film was kind of part of that. But in terms of learning about the production process, learning how to be a producer, this was minimal, and I took very little from the course on that front. My first job at a university was working on a cooking show as a production assistant. I mean, obviously TV is very different to advertising, but I was able to pick up a few bits and pieces here that were definitely kind of valuable, but it was more so when I started running for Melbourne-based production companies. 90% of it was kind of advertising. That's where I really learned about the industry and I guess the process and how everything kind of fits together, all the different roles and from pre until post, what that kind of looks like and how they all kind of work into each other. It was my second year, I think, when I was running on TV commercials that I met a first aid who was kind of helping out on a few of the commercials that I was running on or production managing on. He was directing his own music videos and he kind of said to me, I've got a few more lined up over the next 12 months. There isn't a massive budget, but would you be keen to kind of jump in and produce? And so we actually ended up making, I think, 4 or 5 music videos together, and look, not massive budgets, but as far as music videos go, we had kind of 15 to 20. I think he thought I'd been producing quite a lot outside of kind of running on ads in terms of, other music videos and short films. I know it's a bit of a corny cliche comment, but that kind of like that fake it till you make it mentality, I think probably paid off there. And I think when you're thrown in the deep end like that and you've got no other option, you're committed to something, you've got to really figure it out, as opposed to sitting in a classroom with someone talking at you and you can very easily just tune out. It doesn't particularly matter.
Yeah.
And it was off the back of those music videos, I met a handful of guys. We made a Trop Fest film together that I produced. That one Trop Fest at the end of 2015. And then one of the guys I was working with on the film, Jack, him and I started a content studio off the back of that. So never having produced branded content, which he wasn't really aware of at the time either. So probably were a few white lies along the way there, but all, coming from a positive space as opposed to a negative space.
Did you have any mentors? Was there anyone who was really good to you, who helped you out, who could show you the ropes, guide you, say, look at this, try this?
Thankfully, I had kind of 2 family friends. One's an executive producer with a production company. The other one's kind of like a leading freelance producer. And those 2 individuals were like invaluable, particularly when we started the business in terms of learning more about obviously the brand side of things, as opposed to just, straight kind of creative work, I suppose.
How do you break down scripts? How do you pull them apart, work out costs, how many days, crew? Have you got a system?
First few years when we were producing kind of everything in house, when I was kind of the lead producer that was, physically pulling everything together, I'd create a working document, so often a Google Doc alongside a spreadsheet, and then pull absolutely everything apart. So talents, location, crew, sets, props, wardrobe, makeup, whatever it be, kind of key elements across the job and what was going to be required. From here, and probably due to my OCD, I had a color coding system where I would categorize different elements for easy reference. So once I split out all of this in enough detail, I'd then be able to kind of split out the individual scenes and the exact requirements within each of those scenes. So look, more often than not, that was enough to be able to pull together a rough budget. And from here, I'd be able to sit down with the team, look at the estimated time, the resources, obviously the time required to shoot each of those scenes, the complexity with each of those scenes. Look, I probably should have been doing this because I feel like a lot of the great freelance creative producers I know do this in terms of shot listing, but we'd always pull in a first AD to pull the script apart. And I mean, I don't doubt you'd agree, like a first AD when they pull everything apart, it just instills so much confidence in terms of, how long everything's going to take. And then knowing it's achievable in 2 days as opposed to 3 or 5 days as opposed to 2 weeks. So we'd often tap in an AD at that point, a first AD at that point, and kind of finalize everything to get it back over to the client and signed off.
Good treatment. What makes one? Is there anything you think or you believe a treatment should be? Should it be short, long, verbose, minimalist? New ideas? Stick to the script?
I suppose like the effectiveness of a good treatment influences whether or not the piece of work moves forward, that whether that's a huge campaign for a brand or even, a music video and you're going back to the band and presenting the idea. So there's definitely a few key things that make a huge difference in my mind. Clarity. And I think when you've got a director, a really strong director pulling this together, it's always like a no-brainer for them. So the treatment needs to be clear and concise. It needs to, effectively convey the story, but without too much detail. That's why I could never write a good treatment, because I love detail and I would just end up boring the client to death. Strong opening is a huge one. So extremely engaging from the get-go. So the opening needs to give a sense of the story's tone, the setting, the theme. And I guess to that as well, the voice and the style, it needs to reflect the style and tone of the piece of work. So, a branded piece that's a comedy, the treatment should convey the brand in line with the marketing team's expectation while also being humorous. Vivid descriptions of the characters is definitely a big one, but again, without too much detail, just making sure that's like short and sharp and super clear for everyone to get their heads around. It should be one page, I'd say. Ending with like impact. So ending with a strong impression, make it memorable, whether it's an emotional payoff or a compelling question, whatever. And then tailor it for the audience. So often marketing teams, this needs to be taken into consideration. So the brand, the personalities of the marketing team, who are the key people signing off on it? What do they like? What don't they like? I mean, you don't need to get too kind of strategic on that front and just appeal to 1 or 2 people, but that needs to be top of mind. Are you going back to a very senior marketing team for one of the biggest retail brands in the country, or are you taking it to a local punk rock band out of Sydney for a music video? So know your audience, I guess.
What about page length? Did you ever get into that thought of how long it should be? Shorter, 10 pages, 20 pages, 50 pages?
I think it definitely depends on the job, but I'd say all of ours would have been between 8 and 12. I think it's hard to justify anything longer than that unless it's a multi-million-dollar campaign and, you've got stakeholders from all over the world that are asking multiple questions. Otherwise, I think 8 to 12 pages, if it's being written properly and you've got the right creative director as well as the hands-on director who's actually making the thing, leading it and steering it, that should be more than enough.
How do you track costs? So have you got like a whiz-bang system?
I think if you've got the right formatting set up in a spreadsheet, like a Google spreadsheet, that's more than enough. So all of our working quotes were in spreadsheets. They were all kind of formatted beautifully and would calculate correctly. Once approved by the client, we'd save them out in a formatted, branded document from the spreadsheet. That would go to the client as the first quote. We'd make any tweaks from there. Then once approved, it would go into financial software as an invoice. But living in a spreadsheet, you could kind of split it out different. So you could split it out in line with the requirements of that specific job, I suppose. And from there, hourly, you could be kind of updating it based on, confirmation of crew that are coming back in on their day rates or expectations around overtime or additional fees around location permitting, whatever it was going to be. You could just very easily keep everything updated and keep it all on track.
How do you approach problems when they arise? Have you got a particular way of processing or dealing with them?
Honestly, and I suppose like initially it was sheer panic, which isn't ideal as a producer. I feel like you need to be the complete opposite. It's Ideally, when things go wrong, you're the one keeping your cool so other people aren't panicking. As I slowly got kind of better on this front, I did get better at kind of taking a step back, reassessing the situation, and then figuring out the best plan of attack moving forward. The issues and problems like you face when you're producing are drastically different each and every time. And I know you've posted in your blogs about this as well, Brenton. You know, you can be bickering with like a local publican in a small town to shoot in their beer garden, or shooting a massive piece of branded content, and then all of a sudden there's a crew across the road like drilling into the ground and ruining the audio. So I think just being really on top of it, keeping your cool and knowing there's more often than not going to be a solution. Sounds so corny and cliche, but you're thinking out of the box. We were shooting some stuff for the Olympics a few years ago, and this road crew were drilling and they wouldn't stop. The client went over and look, I think the client was probably a little bit passive aggressive, and so they just kept going. We're like, we're going to have to move locations. We had quite a big Australian athlete who didn't have a lot of time. Then we ended up just going over to these guys with 2 slabs of beer and just explained the situation. They stopped for an hour. So not recommending that slabs of beer is the solution for problems, but I suppose just depending on where you are, there's different approaches, different solutions to the situation.
How do you ensure stakeholders are actively involved and satisfied throughout the process?
Understanding like the exact goals and expectations, I suppose. So, you know, even going back to like the treatment and the production plan, ensuring that everyone is on the same page of what we're making and I guess why we're making it. And I mentioned this one earlier, but I guess like also effective communication throughout the entire process. So that's from pre-production to post-production, being clear and honest, and that's whether it's positive or negative as well. So expectations, I guess alignment on decision-making, giving stakeholders the opportunity to input on major decisions is obviously very important. Being open to feedback is obviously very important, and not being combative, understanding, and you know, this can often happen with creatives if something's entirely shut down, but understanding why a client is feeling a certain way and why they're saying a certain thing, and then be able to work through it, ideally, as opposed to maybe changing a scene entirely or removing, you know, one of the talent that's in a 30-second spot, whatever it be. But yeah, again, it goes back to managing expectations, knowing what people are looking for and why they're looking for it, and then being able to kind of hit the mark. And, you know, in the world of branded content, I suppose, making sure that you're, of course, delivering quality content, which I know is a very obvious one.
How about honesty when it comes to communicating?
I guess that goes back to being transparent, like being honest 100%. That's the kind of thing as well that will come back around and bite you in the ass more often than not. And it's a very small industry. So if you quickly gain that reputation, and whether it's with crew or whether it's with clients, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back, and it's not going to be a positive thing for you. So definitely being honest, being transparent is key.
It is, and I think people respect you even more for it, because not everything's perfect. And if you're upfront and you just tell people exactly how it is, I think that it certainly makes the problem solving, or it makes the next conversation a lot easier, because you're not hiding anything. Do you have a particular way of communicating with clients or stakeholders? Do you like daily check-ins? Do you like emails every couple of days? Is it just depending on the job?
Yeah, I reckon it's probably a fine balance on this front, and giving the clients enough information, but again, at the same time, not overwhelming them with too much information, not bombarding them. In terms of, I guess, general communication, making sure that everyone is again aligned at the beginning of the project. So having a clear timeline with, you know, formal reviews, along with agreeing on ongoing comms. So whether it's email or video calls or a Slack channel, I find that sticking to one method is definitely a lot easier with all of the nuts and bolts that are involved when you're pulling a job together. And particularly if you're across multiple different jobs and you've got multiple different kind of clients and stakeholders, and you're moving between WhatsApp and Slack and emails, it quickly becomes really overwhelming, and, you know, things get lost and they get missed, which is unavoidable when you're working that way. So I guess the other one will be documentation, detailed records of all communication, decision making, and just where things are at. And again, going back to like a Google Doc, being able to kind of track that. So if you've got one client that's using Slack and email, the other prefers to come into the office or be across phone calls, making sure everything is absolutely, you know, documented along the way. Because I'm sure you've dealt with this before, Brenton, and we definitely did, where you wouldn't be across things and then it's like a he said, she said situation, and you never want to get into that. If all the information is there, you won't run into any issues on that front, ideally. Often we'd have the timeline in a spreadsheet, and like the quotes, we'd save them out from a spreadsheet. So then I'd keep a live version of that timeline with the reviews and then just mark it up in the spreadsheet. So, you know, review 1, X said this, Y said this, these are the revisions. Reiterate that with the client, and then make sure there's a note within the spreadsheet that the client has been updated at 3 p.m. on the 2nd of Feb.
What are your best time management tips for juggling projects and multiple projects simultaneously?
Have your own system and stick to it. So, the system can be super simple. A running daily kind of to-do list, which I've had going for probably 7 or 8 years now. So every either the night before or every morning at, 8 a.m. before the day kicks off, or whenever you, first wake up, plan out the day ahead and just have kind of a bullet point list there that you can refer back to, and ideally keep it simple. That's something I didn't do back in the day. I used to have 10 bullet points there and get through 4 of them, and you just end up becoming frustrated, or even worse, rushing through things and not doing it properly to try and get through. So much of producing is like you've just got a handful of tasks, and it's like task done, task done, task done. But you want to be able to, obviously give yourself time to do everything properly. The other one that I found for me, and I guess with someone with OCD, is a running whip in a Google spreadsheet. So it's just kind of like an evolved version of the daily to-do list, which is everything split out across the jobs you're currently working on and everything relevant to just kind of you. I would keep that updated with kind of timelines, deadlines, and even links through to all of the documentation as well. So then the to-do list is more of like a snapshot, and then the running kind of personal whip would be like the month ahead or the next 8 weeks ahead. It's easy to obviously take a lot on kind of without realizing it, and you can be at capacity very quickly, I feel, as a producer. So also being aware of like your own limitations and I guess the workload coming through, rather than being like, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. And then all of a sudden you're a week in and you're drowning and you're not doing things properly. So having the right resources there and making sure there is potential budget to bring on a production manager for a week or for an entire campaign to help, again, when it comes to, the nuts and bolts, because that sides of things are so time consuming. And again, setting tight timelines and deadlines, and ideally utilizing time blocking in your diary for the day or week ahead. And then I guess to that point as well, regularly being able to review and adjust your plan depending on how everything is moving along. And finally, I guess one thing I'm certainly not great at it, but slowly improving at as the years pass, is set time aside for kind of the unexpected small tasks, and then don't prioritize these as they land each day, because they 100% will land. So again, if you've got your to-do list there, make sure that you're sticking to that and you're not being distracted by the emails and phone calls that are coming through. Just naturally, I'm a person that like loves to get things done and things be out of the way, but I could be working on something with a deadline back in the day, and then an email would come through, and all of a sudden I'm spending 20 minutes going back and forth on, on a job, or speaking to a potential crew member where the piece of work isn't landing for another 6 weeks, and it's definitely not a priority. So again, going back to just prioritizing your day and your week ahead and not being distracted with the other million things that are flying around. And then also one thing I'm not great at and getting better at, learn to say no. So again, that goes back to understanding your limitations and not just taking things on for the sake of it and trying to be the hero, I suppose, because it's not good for anyone, your own mental health, but also the team around you if the ball's being dropped because you don't have the physical time or energy. And then, I guess just work hard and strive for the best output. Don't overcook it. Keep it simple, keep everything together, keep the right people around you, and it should be fine.
So what advice do you give to someone who's looking to get in or even advance their career in the world of advertising production?
Don't be scared to pester people. Build a network, contact people every day for a coffee or a phone call. Gather, I suppose, as much advice and information as possible. And as we were saying earlier, like seek as much kind of mentorship as possible as well. I think like a lot of people will be surprised, and this probably goes for most industries. If you're young and hungry and, wanting to excel in a certain area, and you reach out to someone who is far more senior and, has had success in their chosen field, whatever it be, I think you'd be, and even if they're a very busy individual, which often they are, I think a lot of people would be surprised how often people are to at least have a phone call or catch up for a coffee, which again, one coffee for 45 minutes can be invaluable. And then just having that person as a contact to potentially lean on down the track, or to build your own network. Technical skills, creative skills, I guess also business skills, like continue to build and learn in each of these areas as regularly as possible. Having a portfolio or a website, have something with a clean, clear bio about yourself, along with obviously your best work, your key kind of services, particularly if you're a freelance producer. I do think this is invaluable. It does amaze me how many great producers there are out there that don't have a website. Just having something online, even if you're not active on LinkedIn or through an Instagram account, but having a website is certainly important. Industry trends is a big one, staying across this as much as possible. And then work across And this is what I did, which I think helped massively, which I didn't kind of realize it at the time, but working across multiple kind of projects. So going from music videos to short films to branded content to TV spots, and whether you're actually hands-on producing them or you're just running on set, you learn so much when you're out on set. And each and every time you're building a larger, stronger, more diverse network of people. I mean, I'm sure you can agree on that front, Brent. And even when you're just out on set running around when you're younger. And we first met when I was first starting out, back in the day, and I think it was 2012 or 13. But I learned more running on 2 TV commercials than I did in 3 years at uni. So I think that's massive. And that goes back to, not being scared about pestering people, because you just don't know if you randomly contact an EP at a production house, there's a good chance they'll say, hey, just come out and give me a hand on the shoot next week. Education and training. I think if you're always kind of pursuing this, again, audiobooks, podcasts, you don't need to go and be doing additional 1 or 2 year courses, but there is kind of a lot available in this world. So just kind of keeping on top of that. And that again goes back to, I guess, if you're proactive and you're motivated. And that's really the most important one, because if you're proactive and motivated, you're going to kind of hit all of these things anyway. But again, polite, organized, hungry, proactive, motivated, you'll be fine. If you want to make it work, you'll make it work. It's not like the world of medicine or law. You don't need a formal degree to become a producer. You learn, I'd say 95% of it when you've actually finished university. You don't even really need a degree. I think if you're hungry and you're good with people and you're organized, everything else just falls into place.
So give us an insight into your world, Nick. What are you doing with yourself these days?
My agency early last year, I think it was March last year, and just decided it was time for a bit of a shift. I guess with my background being production, we moved into more of an agency model. Obviously, when you do that, production becomes entirely external. And this had actually been back in my mind for probably 4 or so years as my next move. It just ended up happening a little bit sooner rather than later. But I've set up what's called the People Place, which I launched in November last year. So I've only been up and running for about 3 months now, but it's a creative recruitment agency working directly with production companies, creative agencies, brands within house, creative departments, design studios, content agencies, working across all of the kind of key roles and even hybrid roles that exist in each of those businesses.
So where do we find the People Place? Where can people get in touch with you at?
It is peopleplace.com.au, and everything is on the website.
Nick, thanks so much for your time, buddy. Really appreciate it. Thanks for jumping on. I hope you got something out of reflecting on your producing career, and I certainly got a couple of things out of it as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Brenton. It's good fun, mate. Appreciate it.
Well, that's it for today. I'll make the logo bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.